I'm going to be talking about the const keyword in C#, and it looks something like this. So what is this? Well, the const keyword is another immutable data type. If you watched my tutorial on the read-only keyword, then understanding the const keyword is going to be a lot easier. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be explaining the const keyword, but also demonstrate the differences between const and read-only, as a lot of people get confused between the two and which ones they should use and when. So let's take a look at the const keyword now. What I'm going to do is use the previous example, and this will help illustrate the difference a lot better. So here I have my dog class. For anyone that didn't watch the last tutorial, I have two fields here, a constructor that sets these up, and one property right here that just gets the value of the breed. So it's a simple dog class. What I'm going to do is modify this private field here, which is currently read-only, and change this into a constant. Then I'm going to demonstrate the behavior and the differences in this case. So remember, with a read-only field right here, we can actually set the value from a constructor, and we can also initialize it. So let me change this into a constant now. So now you can see an error has appeared, and if I hover over the error right here, it's saying a GUID type cannot be declared as a const. So certain data types cannot be constant. So that's a bit of a problem. So okay, let's make our ID an integer instead. We'll have some sort of system that generates a unique integer for each unique dog. Okay, no problem. We'll use a different data type. Now there's another problem. So if I hover over this, you can see a constant field requires a value to be provided. So basically that means when you declare a constant, like we're doing here, you have to initialize it. You have to give it a value all on one line right here. Otherwise it's not possible. So when we declare something as a constant, we have to give it a value. So let's just say 456, for example. And now there's another problem down here. And if I hover over that, you can see, well, the error message isn't very clear. But basically, once you declare a constant and initialize a value into it, you can then no longer modify this field or variable from anywhere else, not in a constructor. You cannot modify it from a property. You cannot modify this value from outside of the class anywhere else. Once a constant has been set and initialized, which you both have to do on one line, you cannot modify this value. So think of the const keyword as more like a stronger read-only with a lot more limitations in terms of modifying your data. So this is a real big difference here. So for something like generating a unique ID for a dog, read-only is a good keyword for this because we can initialize it from the constructor. However, generating a unique ID for a dog with a constant keyword, this would be a very bad way to handle this situation because const wouldn't be a good way to represent this. So you may be asking, well, what can I use const for? You know, what is a good example of using this const keyword? It seems quite limiting and it seems like I can't really do much with it. Well, for example, let's say we work with pi. And when I say pi, I don't mean an apple pie. I mean pi r squared, you know, 3.1419, I think. So pi is accessed in the mathstatic class. We've looked at the mathstatic class before when working with numbers previously, and there's lots of things you can do in here. But you can see in here, there's one called pi. Now if I hover over that, you can see pi is a constant. Oh, look, 3.14159. I was close. So pi is a constant, and that's because pi doesn't change. Pi is always 3.14159. It just is that value. There's no reason that I can ever think of where we would want to modify the value of pi because pi is what it is. Pi is pi. It's the relationship of the radius to the circumference. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but hopefully I put the point across that you would never need to modify pi because it is a set value. And this is a very good example of using a constant in this case. Pi is constant. You don't modify pi. It is what it is. And when you try to, you can see there's a problem here. So pi is a very good example of where you would use a constant, because this value, once set, is never changed. And there's lots of them. Look, there's e, pi there, and tau. I've never heard of tau, but oh, it's to do with radians. Okay, yeah. A distant memory of a very early math lesson. So you can see this is the point of using constant. It's where you would never want to change the value, and once it's set, it's set. Now constant, you set this at compile time, not runtime. So when your application is running, constant variables or fields need values. You cannot kind of remove the value, run the application, and assign it while the software is running. This only happens at compile time. Another thing with constant, unlike read-only, you use it on private fields of classes, like we explained previously. However, with constants, we can use these as private fields of the class, but we can also use them inside methods. So for example, I can just declare a variable here, I call it ID, I give it the value, then I can use it in the remainder of my method right here. I could also pass it to another method, it's no problem. So const variables you can set and declare and initialize and then pass them around methods, it's no problem at all. However, if this was read-only, like we showed previously, it's not possible because read-only is restricted to private fields. So one other thing I'm going to mention about the const keyword is that it's implicitly static by default. Basically, that means it's static by default. So if you watch my previous tutorial where we talked about the static keyword, you'll remember that static is at class level. So this is where we create a new instance of dog. Then using the instance, which we've created, we can access instance level fields, methods, properties. But when we access things at class level, we use the name of the class, then access anything at class level. And things at class level are static, just like the constant here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this constant ID public. That means we can access it from outside of the class. I go back outside here, I put a dot, and now you can see the ID is here. This is because fields, which are marked as constant, are implicitly static. They're static. If I use DG, the instance, and at instance level, you see the ID is not here. It's not here at all. But at class level, this is where it lives. This is because anything defined as a constant is implicitly static. It's available at class level. And you can see it's not static at all. It's just const. And that's because this has a value, and once set, we can't modify it. So why would we want every instance to have a bit of area in memory where this ID is defined? It doesn't really make sense. If you have 1,000 dogs in your system, then some of your memory will have to be available to add this constant ID for each dog in your software. Now this doesn't make sense because once it's set, that's it. So it makes sense really to have this available to the class. So if we have 1,000 dog instances in our system, we don't have 1,000 copies of a variable that cannot be modified. So that is the reason for this, and it sort of makes sense when you think of it that way. So that's really a bit of a gotcha to do with constant fields, is that they're at class level. So I hope in this tutorial I've highlighted what the constant keyword does, what it means, and more importantly, the difference between constants and read-only in C#.